Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What an amazing day it is. Happy Monday. Hopefully things are kicking off beautifully well and you are accomplishing everything you set your mind to. As you can see, we're in a new location today. We have packed up officially. We're going to be making our way out to DC very soon. And we've got the internet here, which is a little bit questionable to say the least. So we have downscaled a couple things. Hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. Double checking the tubes because we've got some good business to attend to today. Bombshell, Arizona criminal referral. A hearing occurred last week that ran under the radar for a lot of people. And the hearing was quite shocking because we got a whole laundry list of criminal voters that voted that were not glitches, that were not mistakes, that were actually criminal. And this is Arizona now rounding out the evidence, assembling an investigatory package, and hopefully sending it off to the DOJ and the Trump administration very soon. We'll get into the details on that. We'll watch some of the highlights, and then, of course, we'll zoom in and ask what's going on with the lawsuit. We know that the DOJ, Harmeet Dillon, the Civil Rights Division, is suing various different states to get their hands on the voter rolls, and the votes and the voter rolls and the governments that have those lists do not want to turn them over. So the DOJ has responded to a lawsuit or to the motion to dismiss regarding the lawsuit here in Arizona. Adrian Fontes, Katie Hobbs, Attorney General Chris Mays don't want anyone to see what is inside, but now the DOJ is responding in response to their motion to dismiss, and in addition, asking for a motion to compel coming out of the court. So we'll get into that. Should be a good one. And then we'll come back and we'll see what's going on with Judge Judge Boasberg. This, of course, is about Jerome Powell, a criminal investigation underway into him because $1 billion, give or take, has gone missing in the refurbishment of the Federal Reserve Building. Judge Janine Pirro, furious with what has happened there because she's conducting the investigation. She's sending out subpoenas to people, or wanted to, and those subpoenas have now been quashed by Judge Jeb, somebody we've followed for a long time here, an activist, obstructionist judge, and of course, the obstruction and the activism continues. And so we're just confirming that we are connected, just so I can see. I wanted to share with you our upload speed. A little bit rough over here, as you can see. We got a solid 8.57 megabytes going up there. So hopefully we can make our way through this thing. But it is great to be here with you. If we have any jitters or any problems, of course, we're also recording. And so we'll get some of the good stuff up and out after the show. But we like to do it live. You know, it's much better when we do it together. So hopefully we're coming through loud and clear. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing and all the things. Let me make sure that Rumble is getting connected. Somebody says Rumble is not working. And see what's happening over here. Rumble link is not working. All right, let me share that with my team to see if we can figure it out. And yeah, Rumble's not connecting. Let's see. All right, so sent that over there. We might have some lines are crossed. And I've got that going on now. All right, well, so we're checking on that. Hopefully we can get Rumble going right now. Pamela is on it. But it's a beautiful Monday. Got a little problems with the tubes, as you can see. Pamela is checking on that right now as we speak. So we'll give that a second. But we'll get into it because we've got some criminal voters percolating across Arizona. Not ideal. And so let's get right into it, starting now. Criminal voters in Arizona. We have a bombshell hearing that occurred in the Arizona State Legislature. You can see here, this occurred back on March 11th at 2 p.m. It is the House Federalism, Military Affairs, and Elections event. And this was a committee that's on federalism, military affairs, and elections. And it took place last week, essentially, but it flew under the radar, and it really shouldn't have, because what they're talking about here is a whole litany of Arizona voters who are actually not Arizona voters. Many people from out of state, many registrations being conducted on their behalf. and then people voting in elections where they should not be voting. And so I want to go through this hearing in a bit. The whole thing was about an hour and a half, an hour and 35 minutes, but we'll hit the highlights on this. And of course, also zoom in on the case versus Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State in Arizona, who's supposed to be the chief person who governs our elections here. Out of the district court, we know that Harmeet Dillon and the Civil Rights Division was suing to get the voter list to stop a lot of these problems that the legislature and their committee was investigating, so that we don't have to have these criminal referrals and these investigatory packets that are assembled and sent over to the DOJ. So we'll go through this. We also have the full response from the DOJ. This is the United States of America suing Adrian Fontes, and Adrian and the Secretary of State and all of his election thieves, they do not want to turn over that list. So they filed a motion to dismiss, but this is the opposition to their motion to dismiss. And it's also an addendum they're tacking on support for their motion to compel, to say, all right, federal court, enough already. They want to gum up the process and deny federal law and not give us the list. We'll ask you to go ahead and compel them to do that. So we'll come back to that. But this hearing was quite shocking, actually. And of course, the media is not reporting on it because they don't really care. But there was a whole bunch of individuals who were there, members. We got Representative Garcia. Keschel is the vice chairman. Marquez. We've got Powell. Gillette is going to be the chairman who's leading this entire event. And another representative called Colladin. And this involves a lot of election fraud, as we'll see. And so this event was recorded. And I want to just start off with it and give you a preview of what's going on. We'll pause, we'll go check the list, and then we'll come back to it and see how they vote. But here's how it started out in Arizona on March 11, 2026, not long ago.
Okay. This is going to be an investigative referral packet covering, and we're going to cover...
And I've got it at 1.5 speed, just in case you're wondering. And let's make sure that we can boost some of this volume up here because it's sounding like it's a little bit quiet on my end. Here we go with the hearing.
Voter registration anomalies from March 2023 through present. All members have been distributed the packet. It will not be placed on the TV. It is redacted, so no voter registration numbers, full names, full addresses, full dates of birth, anything like that will not be exposed to the public. The referral packet that does go to the Department of Justice will have unredacted information in it. This covers the Arizona Motor Vehicle Division, Service Arizona, Secretary of State, county recorders, and public assistance from HAVA website linkages through Access. Between March 2023 and March 26, we've conducted legislative oversight and run numerous bills to correct deficiencies we found in the voter registration system. Many of them, those bills have been vetoed by the governor. We continue to find these anomalies, and you're going to find in your packet enclosure 1 labeled timeline. And for each one of the timelines mentioned, if there is no accompanying document, the date will say no document because it's something known that you can pull up on Google or whatnot. So I'm not going to read the entire packet, but I'm going to highlight the dates and the pieces of information that we have for that date. So March 2023, the investigation was initiated. There is a slideshow that goes with that, but it will not be presented here. August 2023, voter roll investigation report. That will be the first item on the list, and it is the heavily redacted document. I'll draw your attention to Exhibit 1. This is an individual in Dolan Springs, Arizona, that is registered to vote. We have his voter registration card. We have seen his ballot. It is in the packet. He is not a resident of the state of Arizona. He is a resident of the state of Nevada. We found him through an application for permit for a solar heater for a pool. That's how we found his actual address. So he does own a business in the state of Arizona. That's how we found him to become registered through Service Arizona and the ordering of a non-credentialed license, meaning a vehicle registration. A credentialed license is an ID or some other form of physical identification to include a driver's license. This was for a vehicle registration on a vehicle and trailer. He was automatically registered to vote in the state of Arizona as a non-resident. Exhibit 2. This is someone, as you can see from the redactions, that their address is in Coors Gold, California. They had a previous rental property in the state of Arizona, approximately 9 years old, and they were registered in Arizona, and their registration continued on for the entire time, even after they moved, and sent a letter to the previous county recorder. It's not the recorder that is there now, the previous county recorder. We won't mention names. We have a copy of the letter that they submitted removing and changing their voter registration. Exhibit in 3 and 4. These are legitimate, active military members that are registered in the state of Arizona lawfully and vote absentee. Exhibit 5. These were found on the county tax records and through Unisource, the GIS, and Mojave County Assessor. all have the same dwelling at the same longitude, latitude, the same parcel number listed to a name with 3 different addresses. The individual is registered to vote in the state of Arizona. Exhibit 6. This is another out-of-state voter that has never lived in the state of Arizona. Their only connection to the state of Arizona was a DUI arrest on I-44. Had a vehicle broke down, was found to be intoxicated, arrested by DPS, taken to Mojave County Jail. The only touch he had with the Arizona system was through an NGO that assisted him in getting back on the road, and that NGO registered him to vote in the state of Arizona.
Wow. NGOs registering DUI
to Exhibit
convicts.
7. This is one of the bills that we had. This individual was deceased in 2021, but he died in Las Vegas, Nevada. So Nevada does not have a reporting requirement to the state of Arizona for decedents. Therefore, he remained on the Arizona voter rolls as a decedent. His death was confirmed by the Mojave County recorder, and he was subsequently removed from the rolls. The next one, Exhibit 8. You can see partially from the redacted, this is a phone interview of registered voters in Mojave County, registered in 2008, when they purchased a parcel of land. They have never lived in the state of Arizona. They purchased through a land broker a piece of land and were subsequently given a voter registration. And we tracked that voter registration down, again, through Service Arizona, because they were told if they own land in the state of Arizona, they could register their vehicles in the state of Arizona. Although not living here, they registered 2 vehicles for tax purposes and were ended up being registered in both Arizona and California. And I would like to bring your attention to one of the bills that we were asked to hear supporting Eric. California does not use the system anymore, so there was no feedback to the state of Arizona that these individuals' home of record and their homestead exemption, their tax filing records are in California. They live in California. And furthermore, this piece of land is unimproved land in the middle of the desert, has no power, no water, no structure, and a single roadway in that is awash. It is an uninhabited piece of land that people registered to vote.
Perfect. Vote here. Perfect.
Exhibit 5 was an illegal alien registered in Mojave County, Arizona. This is heavily redacted and removed from the rolls because it was a human trafficking situation. The FBI was already working, and they made the arrest, and we removed it from the exhibit. Exhibit 9. This is another Service Arizona touch. This individual lives in the state of California, temporarily resided in the state of Arizona for an alien grandmother. As she stayed with the alien grandmother, she brought her children and she registered for school and access.
Of course.
She was subsequently registered No Labels Party. Less than 29 days with no intent to stay, clearly documented that it was a temporary situation, yet was still registered on access. So there are 10 situations right there that we were told do not happen. There's no way these people can be registered to vote, and if they are, there's no way they can stay on the voter rolls, yet they exist. The next document you'll see is highlighted in blue with the links. I encourage you to go to this page. It is an access application page. And if you click on these links, you will see that these active links take you to the voter registration within access. And if you clearly read, this is Access Policy 1300 and 1301. It allows the customer or someone acting responsibly for the customer to sign the application. So you can fill out your entire access form verbally over the phone, or you can do it online, and someone acting for the customer can sign the application. That's to include the voter registration because it's all in one form. So how do you affirmatively swear if someone else signed the form for you?
Can't do
the
it.
supporting documents for those exhibits are in order. The first one you'll see is a registration card for the Republican Party. And just as note, I looked for no Democrats. I didn't look for illegals. I did find one, but I used only Republican registered voters for this project to prove that I wasn't showing any bias. This individual, if you look at the voter registration card, date registered 1997. And if you clearly look at the mail, has made it through numerous election cycles without voting. This person has not lived in the state of Arizona since 2000, but they're still on the rolls. The next one is registered No Labels Party through Service Arizona. This is the one I told you that went to Access and registered in 2023, No Labels Party, at a Lake Havasu address. This individual has never been to this address in Lake Havasu and did not stay in Lake Havasu, stayed in another Arizona city. So we've talked about this time and time again, but I'll draw your attention to the next document. This is an email from Secretary Fontes. Hello, counties. We are investigating an issue with where easy voter transaction party preference as of 1/17/24 are now containing the word party. At the end of the party preference value, as a result, the current Avid system may set up an easy voter party preference to other or by default. If this brings attention to the matter, we had a bill saying that it had to only state the party without the word party. Party is not a recognized default in the system, and it would flip the voter registration. And you'll see in the upcoming exhibits, I asked for that very information. You'll see a document marked February 5, 2024, to all the county recorders. It's a public records request, and if you look at page 2, you'll see the information I requested. What steps have you taken to investigate voter registration records or changes to the voter registration record following Secretary Fontes' email? Only 2 counties were able to respond, and I'll explain why. So the first response I got back immediately was from Coconino County. I would draw your attention to paragraph 3. Since the 2022 general election, how many voter party preference registrations were changed from a recognized political party to party not designated or other as a result of easy voter transactions? The Coconino County recorder reported that there was 1,412 changes. The Yavapai County was asked the same question, and they responded that they had no changes. Now, during the time that I was receiving these back, Stephen Richer, former Maricopa County recorder, sent this email to all recorders in the state. I think you've all received a copy of the attached letter from Representative Gillette. That attached letter was the public records request. This pertains to Arizona MVD.
Okay, so this is Representative Gillette. He's the guy who's investigating this. Stephen Richer was the prior county recorder for Maricopa, and he's the guy who's out there all over social media having a panic attack saying, everything I did was perfectly appropriate. Please stop investigating this. Katie Hobbs, Chris Mays, Adrian Fontes, they have been on a media whirlwind to try to propagandize their way out of their thievery and their stolen election.
Voter registration items that the Secretary of State wrote to us about previously. I spoke with Secretary Fontes on Monday. He said he has a good working relationship with Representative Gillette, and I would like to send back a letter that describes the situation, how many registrants affected, etc. Then, if Representative Gillette still needs more information, the counties can share. There is no reason that an elected recorder should reach out to all the other recorders in the state and tell them to deny a public records request from a legislator.
Yep.
Why would that happen if you're not trying to hide something?
Because they're trying to hide something. And that is a Maricopa County recorder. It's not the state recorder. It's not the Secretary of State. That is a local county. Maricopa County is the biggest county. All these other counties are much smaller, Mojave and Coconino. And it's Stephen Richer trying to strong arm the other county recorders to not comply because he knows that if they do, they're going to find a lot more of this.
So I did get the response back from Secretary Fontes, and I'll draw your attention to the back page of that. And the two counties that did respond, Yavapai County, according to the Secretary of State, had 11. Yavapai County told us in a letter they had 0. Coconino County reported that they had 1,412, and the Secretary of State said there was 2. This is a direct violation of federal law. Voter rolls are to be centralized, maintained, and accurate, and numbers are supposed to be matching from the recorder and the Secretary of State. This is prime evidence that the recorder's numbers and the Secretary's numbers do not match. I'll draw your attention to the next item, which is an early ballot.
Here we go.
See, we've redacted it, and we've redacted all the numbers on it. But this ballot went to an individual in Lake Havasu City.
Okay, so let me slow this down a little bit because he's going to walk us through the actual ballots.
Of the state of Arizona. Is not a resident of the United States of America. Resides in Africa. But this ballot, year after year, continues to go to this address, even after a letter sent to the Mojave County recorder saying this individual no longer lives here. But yet we're still sending ballots, something again that we were told is not happening. So I'll direct your attention next. We've identified the problem as the voter rolls, Service Arizona, MVD, Access, and Secretary of State.
And Service Arizona is just a website. You go there and you can do a bunch of stuff that you need to interface with the state. So a lot of it, it's just like an online portal. You have one in your own state, and it provides services.
So my next direction was April 1, 2025 with a public records request to ADOT Motor Vehicle Division. And you can see the request there. What I've asked for were contracts and expenditures, data integrity, and the automatically categorized U.S. citizen non-foreign documentation. The next document is only part of a very long transcript, but the most important part where we met with former Director Jorgensen, his attorney, myself, and our attorney, where, look, I have plenty of, excuse me, look, I have plenty of examples. This one occurred not too long ago. This guy's been on the voter rolls, even though he's been dead for 7 years. Yeah. Admission. There's another one. You can read these for yourself, members. But the critical one is on page 2, paragraph 2. Authorized third-party motor vehicle offices. For instance, let's say Bob Smith owns one, but yet he also owns a 501c3 that's part of Get Out the Vote organization.
Whoa. Okay, so let's pause on that because in Arizona, and you may have these in your states, we have these third-party providers. Okay, nobody wants to go down to the government DMV. In your state, we call it MVD. I think most other states are DMV. Same thing. You go down there, you take a number, you wait in line, you catch a couple diseases, and then you exit, and it's a nightmare. So we have these third-party providers, and they will allow you to process things quickly. Just walk right in, Somebody owns it. They tap into the MVD systems. And it's great, actually. You can go and get things done very quickly, get duplicate licenses, update your insurance, extend your registration, whatever you need to do. But they can be privately owned, and many of them are. So it sounds like one of these people who owns one of these facilities also owns a political organization called Get Out the Vote, which is wild because he can use the MVD and his location to officially register people to vote. And that sort of introduces the problem of bias from that third-party provider as a real possibility and an election vulnerability.
In any of those, do we audit them? But I'm talking about checking whether Bob Smith is involved in a bunch of voter registration schemes. Director Jorgensen, yeah, we do an audit of their financial disclosures. Normally, when we do an audit, it's straightforward check to see if someone like Bob Smith is involved in excess voter registration activities. Just keep that in the back of your mind.
Yep, keep it.
Now we're back to the next two documents are flipped votes. You'll see this is from Maricopa County. This was turned over to new Maricopa County Recorder Heap. This is the same voter. And you'll note one registration is Democrat, one registration is Republican. What I would draw your attention to is the date in 2024. You can look him up on the Maricopa County voter rolls. As soon as the election, during the election, he voted Republican. 9 days later, he received a Democrat card in the mail.
What?
Changing his voter registration from Republican to Democrat.
What?
They left off the first name, they left off part of the address, so it's obvious that he had nothing to do with this. So, obvious question, did you go to the DMV? Are you an access recipient? Did you get any care from the state of Arizona? The only touch he had was through an NGO, which I won't mention here today, but it will be in the criminal referral.
Criminal referral.
So, as we know, there are NGOs and other organizations that have access to the voter rolls and can upload information. That is obviously one of them. So with knowing all that information and going back to Mr. Jorgensen's statement, the next document starts with identify and remove non-U.S. citizens from voter rolls. This was a cleanup effort. These are the things that we identified through the MBD meeting. These are the things we identified that MVD needs to audit, survey, and clean up. Now, you'll see number 2, correct and finalize 20,000 plus legacy pre-96 MVD voters. Obviously, that number is over 200,000, but at the time this was written, we only knew of the 20,000. So, Mr. Jorgensen, I was skeptical, but he appears to, if you look at his record, the previous MVD director, everything this man touched in the state of Arizona got better. He was a true public servant, knew how to do his job, he knew how to get around the bureaucracy, and he started complying with our request. Everything changed in December after he seized the third-party terminal and removed some employees. He started going after the third-party vendors, the kiosk you see in the street, the homeless centers, the third-party vendors that are all over the place that you can go and get a driver's license, ID card, or license plate. This is where it's happening, folks.
Tapped in.
He proved it. A whistleblower came out and said that he was fired because he's being attacked for this. Now, the whistleblower statement, that's the statement I gave to you separately. I don't have all the information on this because it's still an administrative court. We're not allowed to have his administrative court documents until the case is settled. We won't know, but the policy shift is what is being blamed. So this is the allegation from the whistleblower, and this is what we do know. Policy shift. MVD moved to a non-tiered error model, meaning minor administrative mistakes, incorrect hair color on a license can carry the same penalty as weight as such serious violations as issuing a license to an unqualified driver. No correction period. Previous third-party providers could correct errors. Spike in enforcement. According to former MVD third-party administrator Robert Smith, the number of suspensions and revocations between 24 and 25 equaled the total number from 2006 to 2023. So this tells me that Director Jorgensen was 100% doing his job.
He's booting people
And
off.
when I called him in November to see where we were on it, he said there were complications. And I firmly believe those complications were he was told to stop.
Yep.
Because we're losing too many people on the voter rolls. I'll draw your attention to the next document. This is where Trump is in office. He turned the SAVE website back on for all recorders to use.
Thank you, Trump.
And I obviously worked with the Mojave County Recorder's Office. She was able to use the SAVE website, and the 10 exhibits here that I presented to you, except for the 2 Uocava voters, she removed almost 3,998 voters whose registration reflected out of states, mailing, addresses, provided them opportunity to verify, update, or cancel their registrations as appropriate. This is exactly how the system is supposed to work. That is, every bill that we push through this committee is to ensure that the system works and we remove the non-qualified registrants from the voter rolls. The last page you'll see is the actual criminal referral that will be sent out today after this committee. It will be going to the Department of Homeland Security.
Let's go.
Election Assistant Director. You'll see very clearly the federal election laws that are violated: 52 USC 2511, 10307C, 371, 1343, 1001. Now, under election infrastructure and cyber, as you remember, we had a cyber attack to the Secretary of State's office. Many people, I'm still finding, don't know that the IRGC breached the Arizona Secretary of State election system, which is critical infrastructure under federal law.
Wow.
And it is covered under HAVA because it's elections critical infrastructure. We have definite proof that preservation integrity of the election records was not done. It was suspect to computer fraud and abuse. That is 1030-2701. Non-voting, or immigration, non-citizens voting, we have several. That's 611, 18 U.S.C. 611. If you look at the back page, you'll see the evidence of out-of-state registrations or registrants appearing as active voters. You have access to all of this through the voter rolls. There is a voter roll copy in your packet to show you from the voter rolls. That's why it can't be made public, because it's real information. Any of this information you would like to see unredacted, so we don't have a quorum, you are welcome to come to my office in twos, and I will show you all the unredacted information, and this will go forward today. Now, I'm asking members, you don't have to, but there is a signature sheet in your packet, and I am requesting all members that would like to be a part of the criminal referral. We will provide one signature block packet. You can sign on to the referral, or you can choose not to. That is your prerogative, but at the back of the timeline packet, you'll see that we have signature blocks for all members.
And it's going.
So we'll call the roll on that after any questions. Members, are there any questions?
Amazing.
Questions or statements?
Questions, statements, concerns?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this on?
No. Is it working now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to say, well, thank you for doing this, because we've had issues down in Pima County. I had a voter
Tucson.
who moved to Texas. I just want to get this on the record. I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but I had a voter who moved to Texas. It was in the 24 election. She had voted for me in 22. She said she was feeling a little nervous that she wasn't able to get off the voting list, so she checked her ballot in Arizona. The day that her address changed in Texas, it was September 18th. I remember it clearly because we started looking into this. Someone requested her ballot here in Arizona. She pushed and prodded and begged to get an image of her ballot in Arizona. She was told the post office shredded it. She was then told it was stored away, that they couldn't get it for her.
Cover up.
Eventually, they said it was a glitch in the system.
Of course.
So this really shouldn't be a Democrat or Republican issue. We should all want our vote to count.
Yep.
We're supposed to be the ones who pick our elected officials, and we should all want the voter rolls to be clean so that we can all have more faith in our election process. And so these things are occurring. I appreciate my colleague for doing this. It's very apparent there are some major issues. This is why automatic voter registration is such a nightmare. And just really quickly, one quick thing, if you look at the election results for 2020 and 2024, the states that have automatic voter registration, motor voters a little different, but Biden won those 18-2, Harris won them 18-6.
Amazing.
And that's all.
Yep, nicely done. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question.
Certainly.
There's a lot of information in here, but over the many years that I've been involved with voter registration, many of the issues that are there glitches or issues taking place? I would agree, but I've always had, I've always aided citizens that either were new citizens that had registered to vote, as when they exit the swearing-in ceremonies, there's always organizations there ready to register them. They would register, and then they would get their voter ID card, and it was Republican when they had advised Democrat. That happened repeatedly with certain motor vehicles, where you get the DMVs. And so I had to help them, update it to request it over the years. Citizens, again, new citizens that had to submit the proof, and it would take as much as maybe 6-8 months or a year that wouldn't get that response, so they're not able to vote. The clarification, the communication with the registered voter, those are the kinds of issues that I'm used to. But I do have a question.
That's a problem.
With the information, that you collected, are these, does this affect, in other words, I get the glitches, I see the attachments, but
They're not glitches.
did these people vote?
Not all of them. Ranking Member Hernandez, not all of them voted because, to my point, not all of them knew they were I almost said their name. The individuals in California, husband and wife, had no idea they were registered to vote in the state of Arizona. In that exhibit, they had no idea. The individual that was labeled No Labels Party, when I first contacted her, she thought I was a phone scammer trying to sell something. She's not from Arizona. She didn't know we have a No Labels Party. She thought it was a scam. I texted her a copy of her voter registration card. She verified all the information, but she said she was not familiar with that address. She'd never been to that address. So we're talking more than glitches. We're talking somebody physically had to push a button somewhere to register to vote. That is what Mr. Jorgensen testified to. This is not a glitch. That's why he started seizing computers and interviewing people and firing people. These are NGOs and third-party vendors that are registering people to vote. Where are they getting the information? I believe they get it from Access and Service Arizona, because we can prove that Service Arizona will maintain a series of signatures from the voter. So, like you can sign in Adobe, it's a click from an employee to sign someone's name, and now you've sworn and affirmed on a computer click. That is not a glitch. That is a violation of federal law.
Let's go. And this reminds me of the Smurfing issue, right? Where people learn that they have been donating to certain candidates, $7, $8, $15, $13 in high volume. And you go to that voter, you show up to their house and you say, did you spend $15,000 in political contributions over the last 5 years? They say, what? I have $15,000 for these politicians. But it's because somebody took their information and is exploiting it. And this guy just went through 10 examples, right? A handful of problematic evidence that shows that people are being registered to vote, some of whom ultimately voted. So if you extrapolate that, you scale that up to millions of voters across Arizona, you can easily, out of several million of them, squeeze out 11,000 votes or 12,000 votes, which is what Joe Biden won Arizona by. So you got to go backtrace that, really do a full audit of all of these things. And they know that they can hide in the grift. They can hide in this gray area because it's just the law of big numbers. A small contingent, just a sliver of a percent, will actually flip the election. And so it's a catastrophic problem, but it's not just, oops, somebody made a mistake. It's over and over and over. People are being added to the list, which is why they're freaked out. They do not want anybody to ultimately get their hands on the list.
These are not glitches. These are on purposes. Somebody from 1997, how do you skip not voting? This individual registered in 1997 hasn't voted in this state since 2000. 2 cycles, you're supposed to be removed. Why is this person not removed? Why was this not caught by 2 different recorders, a Secretary of State? That's not a glitch. That's an on purpose. Have never lived in the state of Arizona. That's an on purpose. Stephen Richard telling recorders not to comply with the legislative public records request. That is not a glitch. That's an on purpose. The Secretary of State's numbers not matching the recorder's numbers is not a glitch. It's a federal crime. These are the numbers reported by the Secretary of State with his signature. His signature is still affixed to the form. That is a crime. It is not a glitch. This individual lives in Africa, has lived in Africa 20 years, but gets a ballot to his home every year. Not a glitch.
Oh, what a
I saw the
joke.
name on that, that's a Lydia something.
No, that's the.
I thought it
no,
was
ma'am,
intentional.
That is the recorder's name. We did not
I
redact the
know.
recorder. Lydia Durst is the recorder.
Okay.
of-
I didn't do it.
It's not, his name is not Lydia. But that is not a glitch. Members, further questions?
I just have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'm so pissed off. I sued the Secretary of State
I'm so pissed off is what he said in case you missed it. So are we.
2024 because I had a client that was making a request under FOIA for records related to his compliance with the National Voter Registration Act, to which he wrote back that he didn't have any. And it's the National Voter Registration Act in conjunction with Title 16 that creates the 2 cycles requirement for removal. And I have never seen a federal judge get quite so mad at the Attorney General's office and order that those records be compiled and produced long after the election. But it's been obvious that there's been a pattern of intentional obfuscation as to the Secretary's discharge of his duties under the National Voter Registration Act.
Charge him.
And it does appear as if there might be some intent there.
Yep.
Given the pattern and practice
Ding, ding, ding.
Of that office. So I'm very grateful to you for doing this. This actually answers a lot of questions for me, which I'll get into with you, I'm sure, when we're not on a mic.
Very well.
Mr.
And like I said, this started in ·23, and I started pushing legislation in '24 on the knowns, what we had known, and that was fought tooth and nail. Most of it came out of committee with partisan-only votes, and all of them were vetoed, to include lawful presence. Right here, we see numerous violations of lawful presence. 29 days with an intent to stay is actually pretty vague. If you read the law and how it's applied, it's vague. But if you've never lived in the state of Arizona, how do you get registered to vote in the state of Arizona? You're not here for 29 days.
Nope.
The IRS, and probably our esteemed senator could explain this a lot better, but you only get one homestead exemption. So you only get to claim one place as your abode or domicile that you pay taxes at. You can have multiple homes, you can be a snowbird, but you only have one location that you pay taxes at. That is where you're registered to vote, not another state. Now, when we talk about glitches, we did do some work on that, and we requested a penetration test of all third-party vendors. I still don't have the physical, we requested a physical and cyber penetration test of the third-party vendors. I still do not have the results of that, and since Mr. Jorgen has resigned, but since he was actively shutting down third-party vendors, it would appear that the penetration tests were not good. And he was going on. Yes.
I have,
Madam Chair.
so, Mr. Chair, to address one of my favorite characters in the election world in Arizona, Mr. Stephen Richer, who's been out on social media on a major CYA campaign right now,
Yes.
and who
Whirlwind.
is a Republican as well.
Right.
You mentioned him reaching out to all of the recorders. is there something there where obstructs, that he broke the law regarding by telling other recorders to basically obstruct at that point? Or is anything being looked into on that front?
Madam Vice Chair, that was covered in our previous meeting with former DH Secretary Nome and her assistant. There appears to be some obstruction or intent to obstruct other recorders from doing their job because they have an association. He was the president of the association at the time, but he was instructing other elected officials that are not of Maricopa County how to comply or not comply, in this case, with a lawful public records request from the House.
Right. He's not their boss. He's the county recorder of Maricopa, not their senior county recorder, and they report to him. An association so they can get together and talk about best practices, just like lawyers do, and any other group of people that exist in America, fine. But that doesn't give you direct authority or control to say, well, I've come to the determination that this is outside the law or this is something that is illegal if you do it. Adrian Fontes now and Attorney General Chris Mays, we read through their letter here last week where they sent a letter to all the county recorders and said, don't you dare disclose anything to the FBI. If you do that, we're going to prosecute you, okay? They're now elevating it to the upper echelons of our government, saying if you even think about turning over data like Warren Peterson did, our state Senate president, then we're going to hold you in criminal prosecution land, and it's going to be a big problem for you. So it's now expanding up to the very top. And in this case, Stephen Richer is not acting as a boss with a subordinate. He's acting as a co-conspirator. He's acting as somebody who is trying to now promulgate bad guidance and basically cajole people as the primary county recorder of Maricopa County, which is the biggest county in the state, to abide or else.
That is being looked at. And thus we've had a subpoena issued since and complied with.
Let's go.
Mr. Chair, in light of your investigation, is there any reason why these third-party DMV providers that you talked about might oppose a government-issued voter ID requirement for folks who vote by mail?
Mr. Colladin, that is a good question because they provide registration services, but they're also required by the DMV, and they use the same form that you would use at the DMV. So if you look at the form on the computer screen, you see the demographic information, name, all the address information, and then at the bottom of the window on most monitors, you'll see the question, would you like to register to vote in the state of Arizona? The signature line is not visible. So you could go through and click the marks and hit that box as yes, and then you go to the rest of the form, and the prompt for the ID that you're trying to get, they would have to submit documents to get an ID or a driver's license. So I don't think that would hamper their abilities at all, because they're supposed to check for it just like the DMV, or they're supposed to follow the same rules. So I don't think it would hamper their abilities at all. But that seems to be the source of most of the damage coming into the system is from the NGOs and the third-party vendors.
Of course.
Someone going in to get a non-credential or end up registered to vote. So to get a vehicle registration or a registration sticker or a whole number, something like that for a vote, where you're going through the MVD process and you have that touch on Service Arizona. So I don't fully blame the third-party vendors. I believe Service Arizona and its upcoming Max Pro system are registering people to vote with that box being in that location. Because all of these are tied back to Service Arizona. And after speaking to numerous recorders, and if you look at the full transcript of the MVD, when someone is registered at an access location or an MVD location, all the recorder sees on their queue, on their side, that it was a registration from Service Arizona. So they would have to drill down into it to see where it come from, but they assume that it's coming from Service Arizona, it's already been vetted, but that's not the case. As Director Jorgensen said, they do their best, but it's incumbent upon the county recorder to ensure that that registrant meets all the requirements of the state of Arizona and federal voting laws. But since it's already stamped Service Arizona, that creates another problem. In the testimony from Mr. Jorgensen and his attorney, they don't always send it to the county recorder first. Sometimes it's transmitted to the Secretary of State. And when they do their consolidation, it still says Service Arizona, so the recorder may not know where it's coming from. That in itself is a crime, according to the HAVA. So I can't tell you why, but I can tell you what. And the what, it has clear evidence behind it.
Mr. Chair, I just thought it was extremely odd that the third-party MVD providers got involved on an election bill. I don't think I've ever seen them get involved on an election bill. And I was wondering
So they opposed it.
if there's some relationship. And if you don't know, you don't
No,
know.
I don't know that, but I do know last year, we had a bill, or year before last, where Mr. Castleman was still representing ADOT, and there was a bill in Transportation Committee to allow the third-party kiosk at homeless facilities. And the question was asked, when they go in to get an ID card from the kiosk, will they be registered to vote? Mr. Castleman couldn't answer the question. We tabled the bill to the next committee, and when he returned, he said they would be registered to vote. And I can tell you there
Automatically.
was, from one kiosk, about 7,000 registrants that received ID cards. 4,000 of them are also registered voters from one location. And just for giggles, the bill was voted down. It never made it to the floor. It was killed in committee, but yet the policy was continued on by ADOT.
Get as many people on the rolls as you possibly
So
can.
the 12th and Central address registered about 3,000 people to vote. That district, is that your district, Mr. Marquez?
Which district?
12th and Central, the shelter area?
Yeah,
Okay, so I don't,
well, 12th
it's close.
Central Avenue and
So the other side of the street is another district. So if you're homeless and you go on one side of the street, you're registered in one district, but if you're staying somewhere else, now you're not in the right district. That's why we killed that bill in committee. And now we know there's about Maricopa County Recorder is fully on that. He'll be taking care of that.
And think about the verification or the validity of a homeless person who is a registered voter. You say, wow, all these homeless people are voting in big numbers, 3,000, 4,000 people all registered to vote. You want to go validate whether that person voted or not. I used to live in downtown Phoenix, a lot of homeless people. None of them could tell you where they were yesterday, let alone whether they voted or not. So a ballot shows up in their name and it's got votes on it. You say, well, I think this one might be fraudulent. Let me go call this homeless person. Where is this homeless person? Do they have a phone number? No. Do they have a physical address? No. If you actually got them on the phone, would they be able to tell you what they did? No. They're all cracked out on fentanyl. Not all of them, but many of them are. So it is basically just a warm body with a registration number that can funnel votes into the system without any ability to verify it. Because we ask him this question a lot. Did that person actually vote? Were they actually participating in the election? And of course, you can call somebody and say, no, I didn't vote, or you can check their registration and see if a ballot is filed in their name. But with a homeless person, you can't validate that at all. They voted. What are you going to do? Deny their vote? You're going to disenfranchise the homeless? So of course you want them all in there. And if their ballots do come in, there's no way to challenge it because they're actually a live person, but they're not volitionally doing much that you can validate. So it creates kind of this just big gray area, and ballots, I'm sure, are coming in their names, and you can't confirm that they actually did that thing. So many other people, this is ripe for exploitation, can just vote in their name, grab their ballots, fill them out, and throw them in. And it's thousands of people. It's not minor. And these margins in Arizona are very, very small. 11,000, 12,000 votes back in 2020 when Fox News called it at 5 o'clock for Joe Biden.
Members, any further question or discussion before we move to bills?
Mr. Chair, to that point, isn't that like automatic voter registration that's not legal in Arizona?
That is correct. You are
Okay.
correct. That's why we killed the bill, because it was found to be in violation of Arizona law, but the policy was conducted anyway. Again, another violation of federal law.
Criminals.
So members,
Enough, vote.
we'll take a roll call on if you would like to sign on to this or not.
And
those
just a
who
reminder,
after-
this is not a vote, actually. It's just, do you want to get on it or not? This packet is going over to the DOJ and Homeland Security. As he confirmed, they've already met with Kristi Noem and her assistant before Kristi was shifted away to a different agency. And we're now learning, we just heard here that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is somebody who may have hacked our systems, which may be another reason why we had the FBI come in and issue subpoenas to get this material from the Senate president called Warren Peterson.
After committee, we'll leave the form out. You can feel free to sign on. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. The question before you is, do you wish to sign on to the criminal referral?
Yes or no?
Representative Garcia?
Can you, Mr. Chair, can you restate the motion, please?
I'm sorry, sir?
Can you restate the motion?
The motion before you, or the question before you is, do you wish to sign on to the criminal referral that is being transmitted to Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice?
Can, for clarification, are we allowed to vote on something that wasn't posted for voting action?
Okay, then you're right. It can't be a technical motion. So do you want to sign the form or not? Yes or no?
Not at this time. I don't feel comfortable.
Thank you. Mr. Marquez?
Not at this time.
Fraud.
Thank you, Member Hernandez.
Not at this time.
Fraud.
Thank you. Mr. Powell?
I'm happy to sign, but not for KYLE.
We'll correct that. Hey, this packet has been in the works for several years, and we compiled this morning on our office floor, page by page, for this committee. We'll fix that, and yes. Mr. Collins?
Yes,
Ms. Keschel?
it's about damn time.
Okay, and I will also sign. So we, after committee, we'll correct your signature block, we'll sign it, and we will move it up to Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice. Thank you all. Moving on to bills.
All right, so amazing. So we have 4 additional votes on that one. We've got 3 fraudsters or fraud enablers who just say, well, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable about this. So these 3 over here say we're not going to sign on to it. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 who will sign on to it. Again, it's not a vote. It's a criminal referral. The guy, Gillette, laid it out in all its glory that there are massive problems across Arizona. So we got 4 American patriots and we got 3 American fraudsters who are enabling the fraud. I'm not real comfortable signing it at this time. Even though the evidence was just dished out over 42 minutes, they have a full packet in front of them, but they're just, you know, they can't really get onto it. So amazing news. This gives us a lot more detail about what the FBI may actually be investigating right now. And of course, it is exactly why we have to get our hands on the list, which is why the United States of America, via Harmeet Dillon in the Civil Rights Division, sued Adrian Fontes. And they said, hey, give us the list. Adrian Fontes is one of the guys who is now doing the exact same thing that Stephen Richer did, which is saying, don't turn over data. Don't comply with any requests. Keep your list to yourselves. Don't let anybody cross-index or cross-reference anything, or else you'll be in trouble. In this case, now you'll be criminally prosecuted, which is what Chris Mays and Adrian Fontes are intimating as this is spreading around Arizona. So today we've got now a response. Adrian Fontes and the fraudsters, they have asked for a motion to dismiss the lawsuit that Harmeet Dillon brought against them. And the DOJ is now responding. It's the opposition to their motion to dismiss, and it's a reply in support of a motion to compel to force them to give this information over to the DOJ. Here's how it starts. They say, all right, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, brought this case as part of her investigation into Arizona's list maintenance practices. We have 2 federal laws, one called HAVA, one called the NVRA. We also have the Civil Rights Act that are all being invoked in order to get these lists. She sent a demand to Fontes, our secretary, for copies of the election records that he has in his control, citing the Civil Rights Act as the basis for this demand, saying these are federal election laws. Congress passed these things. You have to give them to us. As soon as we make a written request, you have to give them to us. The defendant refused to comply with the written demand. The department then sued under the Civil Rights Act, as they're allowed to. Now, as discussed in a prior motion to compel and the civil complaint, the CRA, the Civil Rights Act, forms the basis for this action to compel the production of election records. Your civil right is a right to go vote. And if your right to vote is being diminished because you have fraudsters or homeless people that have their ballots stolen from them and voted on their behalf in a way that you can never validate, that's undermining your vote. That means somebody else is getting multiple votes and you're not. The statutory background provisions are all incorporated. They say the CRA, the Civil Rights Act, creates, quote, a special statutory proceeding. Pam Bondi, the AG, may file a demand and can also follow that up with a request to compel. When that is filed, the defendant under law must produce the voter registration list and other federal election records. We go back to the Fifth Circuit in 1962 in a Lind case. They said that this special proceeding was necessary to get these records because there's no other device that's available. That's why we're suing in this way. Now, we can only do certain things. The CRA restricts the court, meaning you, federal judge, you are severely limited, okay? You can't go in here and say, well, I think they, privacy problems, or I really don't like Pam Bondi, or I think Trump's trying to steal elections, or nope, can't do that. You have a small inquiry. One, did the Attorney General make a written demand? And in doing so, did this Attorney General state the basis and the purpose for this, period? Did a letter go out that said, this is why I need it, and this is the reason I'm asking for it? And two, was that demand made or of election officers who are responsible for performing these things? Three, did the officer fail or refuse to make those records available? And four, did the Attorney General make a simple statement that she satisfied the first three elements? Very simple. Don't need a full trial. Don't need a judge substituting their decision for that. The DOJ did all of it. They sent Secretary Fontes from Arizona written demands compelling the production of the voter registration database. And despite granting him an exception, Fontes refused to comply with the demand. And you can see why, because inside are going to be a basket full of fraudulent goodies. The secretary refused to comply, and the basis for the demand from the DOJ and Harmeet, pretty simple. Two reasons. One, Title III of the Civil Rights Act and several counties, they failed to provide data. And the purpose was to ascertain whether Arizona was actually complying with the list maintenance rules under federal law, the NVRA and HAVA. The letter explained that we're going to protect your privacy. Okay, federal privacy protections are all going to be imposed under the Civil Rights Act. So don't freak out about it. We're the federal government. We know everything anyways. And we're going to follow federal privacy laws to ensure your voter registration database is duly protected. Now, Fontes responded last year, August 29, 2025. He said, nope, privacy rights. So I'm not giving you anything. So the record before the court demonstrates the United States government has satisfied all of these requirements and the motion should be granted. In other words, the motion to compel, forcing them to give us the list. Their response in a motion to dismiss should be denied, and this court should enter an order compelling Arizona and the database to be sent over to us now. In the motion to dismiss, Fontes and Arizona made several arguments. They say he misapprehends the law and the nature of the Civil Rights Act. He erroneously claims that the court should apply all of the other civil rules of procedure to this matter and have summary judgments and injunctions and all of the other rules that we talk a lot about here, that this case needs to be brought under that structure. But that's not how that works. They say that applies only to discrimination claims and not to demands for your voter list. That follows the procedure that has been outlined by the prior court in Lynn. Those four things, that's the procedure. Did the Attorney General do those or not? So the rules of civil procedure, as we can summarize, don't apply to these proceedings. The Attorney General and her authority allow her to validate what is happening at the states, since, of course, the states send representatives and senators up to the federal government. So following that framework, that's all she has to impart. In that manner, Title III allows her to determine whether this should be instituted. And if Congress doesn't like that, then they can go change these rules. They can pass new laws, but of course they haven't and won't. When Fontes in Arizona argues that the rules of civil procedure should govern, that is a basic misconception, and really all he's doing is trying to scramble to prevent the disclosure of the list. The summary expedited approach makes sense, by the way. This is why it is written this way. The United States cannot be expected to effectively enforce federal election laws like the NVRA and HAVA if Pam is required to allege facts from federal election records that are being denied to her. She got to go make an argument about what's inside the records when she doesn't have the records in order to make a claim? It doesn't make any sense. And also, Title III is not limited to only racial discrimination claims. The plain text of the law says she can make these requests, and other courts have found the same. The language of other words is unambiguous in the law. The words employed are to be taken as the final expression, and the words mean what they say. Congress made clear that in the Civil Rights Act and other civil rights statutes, where it intended the law to be limited to racial discrimination, and they didn't do that here. And moreover, defendants called Fontes in Arizona, they can't challenge the DOJ's basis and purpose for any of this. He argues the United States didn't give a sufficient statement of the basis and the purpose of its request. He says Pam Bondi is insufficient and she's making conflicting arguments. But they're not allowed to do that because what that makes Fontes is the Attorney General. He's saying, well, I don't think her reason's good enough. Well, that's just too bad. You're not the duly appointed Attorney General of the United States. Pam Bondi is. And she has Harmeet Dillon in here, who is actually executing and effectuating these investigations. Now, he says that compliance with federal law could not act as the basis for the request for the list because he says the state already requires certain things like citizenship before being registered to vote. But the United States has 4 responses to that. The state says, we're already checking. You're saying you're going to come in here and check whether we have a good list? We already have good lists because we have rules that say we have to have good lists. So therefore, since we are supposed to legally have good lists, you can't come and validate that. 4 reasons why that's asinine. First, federal courts have already determined that the written demand requirement, all it needs to do is contain a basis and purpose. That's it. Pam Bondi, the AG, must identify in a general way the reasons for the demand. You just need a clearly sufficient statement, and that's good enough. You can't substitute your judgment at the state level. That's why we have federal oversight. We have a supremacy clause, and you're sending people from your state into the federal government to serve in Congress and in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Second, the law applies only to state registration. Third, the DPOC does not apply to elections for federal offices, talking about how Arizona laws are interpreted. And fourth, Fontes omits that the Ninth Circuit has enjoined Arizona's law requirement for proof of citizenship. So because of these distinctions, our demand to investigate your list is now well-founded and the purpose has been sufficiently stated. And so with respect to the first response, they write the U.S. satisfied that requirement by stating explicitly, the purpose of this request, Adrian, if you can understand it, is to ascertain Arizona's compliance with list maintenance under federal law, NVRA, and HAVA. His references to the Ninth Circuit case are irrelevant, and his motion to dismiss for not meeting an elevated showing of his interpretation of a proper basis and purpose fails under the plain language of the law, and he can't recreate the law in his own liking. Similarly, the Arizona list falls within the broad definition of all records and papers under Section 301, saying federal law says all records and papers, all of it, not the ones that Adrian thinks are appropriate. Federal courts have applied Section 301. When they did, they concluded that Congress meant what it said in the law. It does not exclude production of electronic or non-public records or what a state may deem to be private or confidential. One court has already explained this, says there is nothing uncertain about that part of the act. It says all records and papers which are in possession of the election officials. If those are requisite to voting, if they're related to voting, if they're in your possession, Section 301 says they have to be preserved and retained for 22 months or else you're in violation of the law. Fifth Circuit said the same thing. Many courts have said this is a sweeping statute. It includes all records and papers, records meaning even the electronic ones. Now, while other courts mostly agreed with the United States, there were a few atextual conclusions, but no federal courts have adopted the limitations of which Fontes is arguing for now. And moreover, federal courts addressing similar provisions of federal law interpret election records expansively. In fact, in Maryland, when it looks like Judicial Watch brought a lawsuit, they said that, fast forwarding, with that focus of information, everything basically, including the state voter registration list, qualifies as an election record. Now, they're citing other cases, but what they're talking about is a private entity. They're saying, well, other courts have said that this organization, like Judicial Watch, can't go get everything. Well, it's not the federal government. Judicial Watch is not named under the NVRA or HAVA as having root access, essentially, and admin privileges to go get the records. The Benson court misinterpreted the term comes into possession and focuses on other cases that are just not relevant here. So this understanding of possession is also consistent with other litigation to ascertain whether a jurisdiction like the rigged Arizona, whether they engage in practices that violate federal law. The AG needs to examine the actual list, the applications to register, and the final voting rolls, including the electronic databases, to ensure that they have been properly processed and are properly maintained. If you limit the ability for the AG to anything other than all records, that would be impossible to carry out the duties that, of course, were assigned to her by Congress. They wrote HAVA, they wrote the NVRA. You don't like it, Adrian? Go talk to our Space Cadet Senator Mark Kelly. Tell him to change the law along with Ruben Gallego. Nowhere does Title III limit the information the AG may receive. She's allowed to bring a lawsuit to do that, and that's exactly what she's done. Now, also, Title III provides for its own enforcement, and it does not include language that protects taxpayers or prohibits information from being sent because of privacy rights. Despite the textual differences, these are codified, and there's nothing in there that says we have to prevent the abuse of taxpayers. What we're doing is lawful. Now, he argues that he's bound by state law to not comply. He says that the state law actually supplants federal law and that they're not preempted by the federal rules. His reliance on state law is also misplaced. Courts have already long recognized that the election clause of the Constitution allows Congress to preempt state law. The election clause says this: the time, place, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed by each state by the legislature thereof. But, and this is what they always leave out. You see this on X all the time. They say, Congress can't sue, or the DOJ can't sue, and they just cut off the elections clause right here. Shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. And of course, we always have our COVID rants here because the courts, back during COVID, they bypassed the state legislatures. They ignored all of this. They said, well, it's an emergency. It's a state of emergency. And so they allowed third parties to sue, friendly blue third parties from Mark Elias's Retired Alliance of Michigan of America, to sue blue secretaries like Jocelyn Benson. They would enter into MOUs, memorandums of understanding, or enter settlement agreements. And then in those agreements, they would change the election rules. They would deploy ballot boxes. They would extend the election deadlines. They would waive signature requirements. They'd make online registration more accessible in violation of state law. And so they just invoke the Constitution whenever they want to, of course, rig their elections. They invoke certain clauses and leave the other half out. But this section right here, to continue the elections clause, Congress may any time, make by law and alter such regulations, exactly what Congress did by passing HAVA and the NVRA. And they're not actually altering the time, place, and manner of holding the elections. They're actually just imposing a requirement that your lists are shared up so that they can validate what you're doing before you send senators and reps into federal Congress, even though they may be fraudulent. The Elections Clause occupies something of a unique space in the Constitution because it is, quote, a default provision. It invests the states with the responsibility for the mechanics of congressional elections, but only so far as Congress declines to preempt the state legislative choices. Thus, it is well settled that the Elections Clause grants Congress the power to override state regulations by establishing uniform rules for federal elections, binding on the states. The regulations made by Congress are paramount to those made by the state legislature. If they conflict therewith, the latter, so far as the conflict extends, it ceases to be operative. The feds win because you don't want a state that is conducting fraudulent elections and then just sending in rigged senators or rigged representatives into Congress. You say, well, maybe at the federal level, we want to prohibit and prevent that from happening by imposing just a modicum of election integrity. Congress preempted Arizona state laws and defendants' arguments in the 3 statutes here. There is a sweeping obligation of election officials to preserve and request and produce records pertaining to federal elections. HAVA requires states to implement a computerized voter registration database and establishes minimum standards for accurate lists, which includes the use of, quote, system of file maintenance that makes a reasonable effort to remove registrants who are ineligible to vote from the official list. And the NVRA does the same. It says you also have to make available all records concerning the implementation of programs and activities conducted for the purpose of ensuring the accuracy and the currency of official lists to eligible voters. And so thus, both these statutes preempt state laws interfering with the production of election records. But then their catch-all argument, of course, is privacy. He argues that various federal laws are now a complete bar to the ability to get the records. So federal privacy laws are in conflict with federal election laws. And so he says the federal privacy laws win. None of the statutes, though, that he cites prevents the government from securing the list from Arizona or anywhere. Additionally, Arizona provides the full unredacted data, the very data that we seek, to the Election Registration Information Center called ERIC, which is a private party for the purpose of list maintenance, right? We outsource all of our stuff to private third parties like we do in Runbeck, which is a private company that manages large swaths of our elections. And then when you say, can we investigate what's happening with Runbeck and see whether they're doing things appropriately? They say, no, they're a private company. What about our privacy going over to them or to this company called ERIC? It strains credulity that Arizona can provide unredacted information to a private company called ERIC, but not to the United States to verify that the state is complying with federal law. And by the way, the United States is complying with the Privacy Act. The defendant, Fontes, he suggests that dismissal is appropriate because the allegations of the complaint establish the DOJ failed to comply with the Privacy Act. But rather than acting as a proactive bar to getting the list, the Privacy Act and Section 304 of the Civil Rights Act simply require that when protected information is obtained, it must be securely stored and not disseminated. So in other words, once they get the data, they have to protect it, and they will. The voter information that the United States is collecting is maintained according to the Privacy Act, and it's explained in all of our policies. All of these are published online from the DOJ and the Civil Rights Division and more. The full list of routine uses for this collection of information, which include investigations and other enforcement actions, are all online. Go look them up. They're at page 24, 148. Oh my gosh, no. They're at page 24,148 and page 24,151. That's a big book. The statutes cited for routine use include all of these provisions that are in question right now, and the United States is following the law. Now, to the extent that he's concerned about the transport of such data, the DOJ uses a secure file system, Justice Enterprise File Sharing, the JEFS. That system implements strict controls, and everything is covered by policies. We use it in every other modality, so we can use it here. Just upload the files there, Adrian. The Privacy Act regulates federal agencies, but it doesn't restrict the state on what they can share. The statute's plain language confirms this as well. And all state and local entities fall outside of that definition. So there's no basis for the state in Fontes to fail or refuse to disclose this information, particularly here, because the United States is in fact complying with the Privacy Act. Now, similarly, the E-Government Act, which is another last-ditch effort to save my privacy, it doesn't authorize dismissal of this case. The E-Government Act is not applicable to the United States enforcement of federal law. The U.S. is not initiating a new process where it's contacting people for information. The request is made to the defendant, to Fontes, the secretary, to provide a list already maintained pursuant to federal law to analyze whether they're actually doing it. The database would be kept on a system where a privacy impact assessment has already been done. And so there is no violation, and his reliance on bad case law should not be dispositive and not result in a dismissal here. And finally, Fontes incorrectly maintains that dismissal is warranted because it violates the Driver's Privacy Protection Act. And while the DPPA generally does prohibit the disclosure of personal information that was obtained by the state DMV or MVD, it contains a literal exception permitting certain governmental uses. All you got to do, Adrian, is look up 18 U.S. Code section 2721AB and others. Disclosure is allowed if you are using it for use by any government agency in carrying out its functions. This language demonstrates it's not intended to block us for it. It's intended to protect people from bad actors. So the prohibition is clearly not implicated here. The DOJ is a government agency performing a statutorily mandated function. All we're doing is verifying voter registration records, the list maintenance activities, and more. And so under governmental function exemption, this is permissible. Transfer of this data to government agencies for official functions, including registration, administration, and more, is squarely consistent and falls perfectly within the statute's exceptions. And so, in conclusion, from Team Harmeet and the Civil Rights Division, they say, for the foregoing reasons, the United States submits that the motions to dismiss by the rigging Secretary Fontes be denied and the United States motion to compel be granted. Force them to give us the list. Sign here in a very nice filing by Jonathan P. Howenschild from the Civil Rights Voting Division and Team Harmeet. So very nice filing. And now this is going up to Judge Brnovich, which is an interesting judge. I do believe this judge have been married, Susan Marie Brnovich, to our prior Attorney General, Mark Brnovich. And he was not all that gung-ho about investigating election fraud. So we'll see what happens here. And the filing just dropped with a bunch of declarations and all of the consent judgments and other orders now making its way up. But we have a big problem in Arizona. And it's pretty shameful when you have a beautiful display by a representative called Gillette who walks us through 10 examples of serious list problems, some people voting, some people not, but a whole smorgasbord of people who are registered and on our lists that create a ripeness for fraud. And when you've got homeless people, I think is one of the best examples, who are all being registered to vote, and you can't validate whether they actually voted. And many of them are so high on fentanyl and living in a different planet, talking to the trees and doing other things, they would never complain. They're never going to check and say, oh, somebody voted on my behalf. And so how do you invalidate that? It is unverifiable, which is the point. So some of these records, you can validate. You can falsify it. Voted, didn't vote, here's why. But for many others, there's just a gray area. And in the gray area is fraud. And Arizona is riddled with it, which is why they're so panicked. Katie Hobbs, Chris Mays, Adrian Fontes, and Stephen Richer all now panicking, running to the media, hopping on MS Now, and trying to make their case that it's time to move on because we know what they did. And this is even deeper than just, this is about the list and who's on the lists and how those lists are being maintained and actually created, not to mention all of the other problems in the processing of the actual election, whether it's outsourced to third parties like Runbeck, whether the papers and the selection of what size paper to use is completely rigged so that people are waiting out the door on election day when they're going to try to vote for Kari Lake. And the list goes on and on. Changed memory cards, breaking the seals on the devices, and then failing to do additional logic and accuracy testing in the aftermath of those changes. Major problems. And now we're learning, apparently the IRGC was also hacking into our elections. Maybe that's why Kristi Noem was out here and why the FBI now got their hands on terabytes of data. But we've got a real problem in Arizona. And if it's happening here, it's happening everywhere else. We know it is in Fulton, in Colorado, in Michigan. As the election riggers continue, we're not going to let it happen. Thank you for spending time with us here today to highlight what's happening behind the scenes and bring this to the attention of the average voter who probably presumes that a lot of this is just operating perfectly well and their vote counts, when the truth is it doesn't. Every single illegal vote diminishes our vote significantly. We can't let it happen. We need to have the SAVE Act passed. We need to have much more stringent requirements for the conduct that occurs in our elections. And we're going to be here to keep our eye on this. thank you so much for sharing this video, especially if you're in Arizona. And thank you for liking this video, subscribing to our channel, because we will be back here on the next one. Now, we're not done yet. That was a doozy, man. That was a great job. Shout out to Representative Gillette. And let me make sure you know who he is. Representative Gillette, here is his name right here, so you can see who that was. And it was a beautiful assemblage. So that's going to be a criminal referral making its way up to the DOJ. We'll see if other Democrats want to sign that after the hearing was over. We doubt it, because this is how they win. And they are perfectly happy with the current system. So we're not done yet, though. We've got another update here, courtesy of the DC District Court out in Washington. And it's about Judge Jeb Boasberg. And here we go. Judge Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, goes nuclear on Judge Boasberg. We know that there was an investigation that was well underway until Boasberg obstructed it into Jerome Powell. And we have questions about maybe give or take $1 billion that Jerome has repurposed for his reconstruction, his refurbishment of the Federal Reserve building that apparently is missing or unaccounted for. So Pirro was investigating him and demanded that subpoenas be issued. And this case has been percolating behind the scenes, under seal, in grand jury subpoenas. We know that this process is largely kept from public eye until it has now emerged into the forefront. And what happened here is that Pirro submitted a response. She said, "We want subpoenas so we can go actually investigate these crimes." And the government in this filing responded to a motion by the defendant, in this case, Jerome Powell and others in Jerome Powell's orbit, to quash those subpoenas, to say that Janine can't get court approval to go and investigate really anybody. And this is curious because the judge who is, of course, managing this case is Judge Jeb Boasberg, the same judge who granted Jack Smith subpoenas to go spy on senators and to go surveil their court records and hand Jack basically everything he wanted from Verizon. I think Verizon actually did not comply, but AT&T. And these were sitting U.S. senators along with another House representative. So for Jeb, it's good enough if you're going after Republican senators, but not good enough if you're going after Jerome Powell, whom allegedly misappropriated $1 billion. So Janine came out and she said, why would a judge do this? Why would a judge prevent a grand jury from doing its job? The grand jury is supposed to be a neutral body. You just have to present the evidence to them, see what they say about it, and then it's bypassing Janine. It's not Janine's decision. It's the grand jury's decision to go authorize a subpoena or to approve criminal charges and to take this case forward. But Judge Jeb, as usual, is running interference because he hates Trump. He hates the Trump administration, and he has been doing this for now well over a year. And now Janine has basically had enough of it. Here is what she had to say in her press conference announcing this continual obstruction.
This process has been arbitrarily undermined by an activist judge. We have a process. We have been asking for information about a matter that has raised questions in many people's minds. Senate banking, the public, the papers, it doesn't matter. So give me the information so I can assess it. Give me the information so the grand jury, comprised of regular Americans, should say, there's nothing here.
Exactly.
And I'll accept it the way I accept other cases. Okay? Whatever it is, we'll abide by it. What we don't accept is a judge standing in front of the door of a grand jury blocking our access, a role that has never been envisioned, a role that will now be used by other defense attorneys around the country, who's going to come in with a client and say, oh, my client is being targeted. Don't you dare go in the grand jury. A judge says, yes, the guy's bathed and washed in immunity, and you can't go after him. The process should have been allowed to run its course, and it wasn't. And shame on them.
Shame on them, and shame on Judge Boasberg is really who she's talking about. But of course, here was the filing from Janine Pirro in her office as the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia in Washington, D.C. She said, as part of our investigation into possible fraud, and false statements related to the renovation of a government facility, we asked for 2 grand jury subpoenas. They were issued to the board. Now, the board claims the subpoenas were issued for an improper purpose and now asks the court to quash them, in this case, Judge Jeb. But he was not that interested in quashing subpoenas when they went out to various Republicans like Marsha Blackburn, a senator in Congress. In support of its claim, the board provides a prolix recitation. And I looked that up because I didn't know what that word meant. And it means a very long, extravagant explanation of social media posts and other comments, which of course came from Trump. While the majority of these posts and comments preceded the subpoenas by months, if not years, the board does not present even a scintilla of evidence they had any effect on the issuance of the subpoenas. The board's argument suffers from the logical fallacy of post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is essentially that something happened after something else, and therefore the thing that happened first is the cause of the thing that happened second. So, in other words, Trump's posts caused the subpoenas to happen, even though that's not logically valid, okay? They may have been contributory to it, or they may have been the cause, but just because of the fact that there were posts doesn't mean that this is the cause of the subpoenas. Now, since the board has failed to establish that the subpoenas were issued for an improper purpose, their motion should be denied. Here's some more. The board is in the process of renovating its facility. Jerome Powell's Federal Reserve Board, one of the most rigged institutions in America, created back in 1913 once we got the income tax. Woodrow Wilson and others decided, you know what we should do? Take our monetary policy and alleviate it from the American people. And then we'll have another board of people who can govern that, which of course impacts all of us. And we have very little accountability that board does to us. But specifically, the Mariner S. Eckley's 1951 Constitution buildings. So the renovation has involved substantial cost overruns, of course. These overruns have been the subject of congressional oversight, including testimony from Jerome. And his testimony contained possible discrepancies. So in November 2025, Pirro began an investigation to determine whether the renovation and their overruns were indicative of fraud, saying a 4-year-old OIG audit did not obviate the need to investigate. And whether Powell and his congressional testimony contained false statements in there, which is a big problem if you lie to Congress. The U.S. Attorney's Office contacted the board in December. We tried to be collaborative with them. We tried to obtain the relevant evidence. Specifically, Pirro contacted the board by emails back on December 19, 2025, days before Christmas, and then again after Christmas on the 29th. In both emails, the U.S. Attorney indicated a request to meet in the first week of January 26, and in both emails, offered to provide additional details and context in a phone call to make sure the meeting was productive. The board never replied to either email, refusing to cooperate or respond to the DOJ. On something, a grand jury investigation of potential fraud with respect to the board's renovations involving possible violations of redacted was opened. The subpoenas were issued to the board on Sunday, January 11th. Chairman Powell publicly announced the board got the subpoenas in public. The subpoenas were returnable on this date, but to date, the board still has not complied. Explaining on January 27th, then, not long ago, the board's attorney asked to meet with Pirro to go ahead and discuss the subpoenas. The requested meeting, which included Chair Powell's personal attorney, was held back on January 29th this year. At that meeting, Jerome's attorney told Janine that first of all, this is some pretty big bravado here from this guy. He walks in, he says, Judge, Trump doesn't have enough votes in the Senate to confirm a new chair. You know that, Tom Tillis. The chair feels like the independence of the board requires him not to be pushed out. And Jerome, he feels like he will not leave the board when his term as chair expires if he is still under investigation. So in other words, you really want me out of here? Drop your investigation and maybe I'll leave. But as it stands, if I'm under investigation, I'm not leaving. While he could not say the converse is true, it would be different and a different look to the chair if he was not facing criminal investigation, and the chair would be free to make that decision that he could focus on his family. Now, when the meeting ended, Janine and the board agreed to continue to discuss the subpoenas, but shortly thereafter, the board's lawyer contacted the prosecutor to report the board has now filed the motion to quash the subpoenas. She explains, grand juries have broad powers. Their subpoenas are presumptively reasonable. That's why they approve them. The board has not come close to carrying its burden of overcoming that presumption. And of course, we know a lot about grand jury proceedings. Gives us a lot of background here, saying we've had them for a long time. Bunch of case law being cited, U.S. Supreme Court case 1972, 1976, D.C. Circuit 1985, and many more. And these subpoenas are perfect, okay? For example, a subpoena may only be quashed if the dominant reason for its issuance was improper. And since grand jury subpoenas, as we just saw in the case law, are in fact presumptively reasonable, the burden of showing unreasonableness must be on Jerome. The government may be required to reveal the subpoena recipient to them, the general subject of the investigation, and that's been done. We've already talked to them about that. But the government even reached out to them before the issuance and tried to get the information voluntarily. But nevertheless, the court should exercise caution. Janine is saying, do not quash these things. Boasberg is, of course. Don't do it. The board claims the subpoenas were issued for an improper purpose, which is to harass Jerome Powell because we don't like his monetary policy. And explains that because of the broad scope of a grand jury and the presumption of regularity, these objections are almost universally overruled because everybody's going to complain when they're under investigation. Now, as opposed to harassment, allegations of improper purpose typically arise where a defective subpoena is clearly linked to improper purpose. But the board hasn't shown that now. In fact, the record shows the opposite. It shows that the subpoenas were properly issued pursuant to the grand jury's broad investigative fiat. The board's renovation of its facility has run far over budget, raising the specter of fraud, and Powell's testimony contains possible discrepancies, raising the specter of false statements. And so accordingly, there is a legitimate basis for the ongoing grand jury investigation and investigation of his testimony to Congress. The subpoenas are calling for information related to that. And Janine already contacted the board privately to discuss these matters. It was only after their overtures were rebuffed. You drop the investigation or we're not leaving. Then sent a number of emails that were not responded to until the subpoenas were ultimately issued. And Chair Powell, he's the one that came out and said, I just got hit with subpoenas and made the whole thing a public battle. Now, in an attempt to rebut this record, the board makes fanciful claims and speculates and attempts to draw connections where there aren't any, saying this is improper. The evidence of improper motivation doesn't survive even a cursory review. The board says that a communication by the president referencing potential prosecutions, which references Comey, Adams, Shifty Shift, and Letitia, none of which have happened, by the way, not a single one. Comey's running free, talking about Beyonce out there. Shifty Shift is being shifty, and Letitia is the biggest tish in New York still. A similar statement by the president mentioned Obama, nothing for him. Hillary, nothing for her. Joe Biden, nothing. Comey and Clapper. Clapper is another one, man. I can't believe that guy's still free. Chairman Powell's name, however, is conspicuously absent from those lists. Trump didn't even mention him. The board also claims that the day before the subpoenas were issued, the president urged certain attorneys to more quickly advance these investigations, some thinking that there's a causal link here. But their suggestion that this is inappropriate is undercut by the fact that the grand jury investigation was opened on this date and the U.S. attorney first contacted them on that date. In addition, prior to even contacting the board, they tried to resolve this matter quietly. Janine had reviewed all of the nearly 600 documents the board had previously provided to Congress, and however, she deemed those unresponsive to the inquiry, given a majority of those documents were from 2019 and 2020, years before the renovation even began. And last, the board's citation of a litany of Trump comments is disjointed. Its chronology undermines the board's allegations. All of that is used to cite improper purpose. For example, they cite a reference to an investigation from July 2025, which was more than 3 months before Janine even opened up the investigation. They also cite the announcements of a lawsuit, which was, again, after Janine opened her investigation. Now, at bottom, the Federal Reserve Board and their insinuation that the subpoenas were issued as a culmination of a 7-year conspiracy to lower interest rates is dangerously speculative, and its theory as to how the issuance of these subpoenas could affect monetary policy strains credulity. So ironically, writes Janine, It is the board that has cynically attempted to inject politics into this matter by strong-arming Janine. First, Chair Powell's lawyer suggested to the U.S. attorney that Powell would be likely to step down when the term expires, but only if the subpoenas were withdrawn and the chair is no longer under investigation. By making this peculiar suggestion, almost a threat, the board morphed the subpoenas into the exact thing about which they complain. It's a mechanism by which Chair Powell could be removed. And second, while the board previously submitted nearly 600 documents for congressional review, it has refused to provide a single document in response to the subpoenas, further demonstrating that by stonewalling, the board wishes to politicize the grand jury investigation. And third, it was Powell who publicized this. And finally, the board cites certain public figures and their opinions about the issuance of the subpoenas as if the grand jury investigations are conducting according to punditry and public opinion is a reason to stop a legitimate investigation or refuse to comply with grand jury subpoenas, both of which would set terrible precedent. So in sum, writes Stephen Vandervelden from Janine's office, the board has not carried its burden of demonstrating that the subpoenas were issued for an improper purpose, much less impropriety that dominates the purpose for the subpoenas. So Jerome's motion to quash should therefore be denied, and the board should be ordered to comply with the subpoenas forthwith, courtesy of the DC U.S. attorney. Now, of course, Jerome came out and got Jeb to agree with him. And here is just the highlights of the decision. You'll get the gist of it in about 2 seconds. Here's what the judge, Jeb, opens up his decision with. Trump post after Trump post. Jerome, too late. Powell has done it again, says Trump. He is too late and actually too angry, too stupid, and too political to have a job there. He is costing our country trillions. Put another way, too late is a total loser and our country's paying the price. So Jeb goes, that's at least one of 100 statements of Trump and his deputies attacking Jerome. And so, of course, it's just line after line. And this is, of course, what is happening, right? When Trump posts stuff like this, the judges are going to latch onto that and substitute his post for a better argument. Right now, they just say, you're being vindictive. You're attacking us because Trump is out there in the court of public opinion trying to rally support around these actions. He cites first 2 paragraphs are basically all comments that have been posted online. Bill Pulte posted stuff and citing sources from the Hill, U.S. Saudi investment forum. Trump says, I want him out. Jerome goes through it all and says, see, this is evidence. Janine works for Trump. They've served subpoenas and we have to ask, was this proper? And of course, the judge is going to do analysis and say, it wasn't because of Trump. Says Congress foresaw the danger. That's why it gave the Federal Reserve power to be shielded from political pressure, which is insane to me. How do you live in a democracy when your monetary policy is outside of the political process? Shouldn't we have a say in that? Even if we want to do things that are bad for our own monetary policy, isn't that our right as free people in America? Maybe we want interest rates at 0. We have massive inflation. We wreck the whole economy. Well, now we learn. And we come back and we have more oversight over it. But now we are delegating these things to Jerome and the other woman, Lisa, who apparently can't even fill out her mortgage forms right. So Trump, of course, he says, you get the gist of it, screaming at Jerome, says, I do a much better job than these people, talks about it constantly. Another Trump post. And another Trump post over here. Trump has aimed his anger. More Trump posts. Being perceived as the president's adversary can be risky. Going after Comey, Schiff, and Letitia. It's not risky at all. They're all running free. All of them. Nobody's been prosecuted for COVID. Nobody's been prosecuted for January 6th. We've got no Russia collusion hoax prosecutions. CIA covering up for Hunter Biden. The FBI, the DOJ, warning him, obstructing their own investigations. No one's prosecuted at all. So long story short, says now the sights have been set on Powell, citing more posts, more online articles, and the list goes on. And so it's basically, this is vindictive and selective, and it's an improper purpose. He goes through a bunch of the case law, a bunch of the analysis here. You get the gist of it. So we don't need to get to it, but we fast forward through it to the end. It's a 27-pager. And he says, in conclusion, a mountain of evidence says the government served these subpoenas because of pressure, political pressure. On the other side of the scale, The government has produced zero evidence to suspect Powell of a crime. Indeed, its justifications are so thin and unsubstantiated, I can only conclude that they're pretextual. This is the same judge that ordered the airplanes to be turned around as they were deporting illegal aliens down to El Salvador. Turn that airplane around, I'm the president. So the court finds the subpoenas were invalid and quashes them. So the criminal investigation now basically dead unless and until Judge Janine Pirro files her appeal, which may be coming soon. So that's more from Judge Boasberg, one of the most obstructionist activist judges in recent memory and modern America. And of course, Janine follows that up going nuclear about Tom Tillis, saying, don't we have an ability to understand where $1 billion has gone, or do we just have to sit here and take it? All the fraud can continue on without any repercussions for the fraudsters or even criminal investigations, because in many instances, judges are booting the proper prosecutors. In the Letitia and Comey case, Lindsay Halligan nuked, Alina Abba booted, and the list goes on and on. Prosecutors getting kicked off to protect the prosecuted. And here, the investigation can't even get off the ground because Judge Jeb, again, is acting up.
Your reaction to statements from Senator Tom Tillis, who has been blocking and vowed to continue blocking.
You know, honestly, I don't know and I don't care, and I'll tell you why. I am in a legal lane. All of the rest is white noise. I don't care what they say. I have a job. I have the ability to go into a grand jury. There are questions that the American public and people in D.C. are entitled to know where $1 billion has gone. And that's my focus.
But he is asking for an assurance that the investigation into Powell has ended it. Are you willing to concede?
Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, is this?
I just said that this decision will be appealed by the United States Department of Justice. That's the answer to your question. What crimes exactly are you investigating? We're looking at 1001, and we're also looking at a statute having to do with fraud, but it's up to the grand jury to make that decision. We're $1 billion over in cost overruns. Are you kidding? $1 billion? We're not talking about huge buildings here.
Can you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? Said Janine Pirro to that journalist. So more obstruction from our judges. What is Congress doing? They're actually supporting the judges. And Tom Tillis is saying, how dare you investigate Jerome Powell? I don't care if $1 billion is gone. I don't care if millions of Americans are deprived of their electoral rights. Tom Tillis is on his way out, and he's basically willing to burn down the Trump administration as he gets booted out of there. So, of course, we'll see what the appeal looks like and whether the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals will reverse this and say that maybe Boasberg is overstepping his bounds. But time will tell. We're going to keep our eye on this one, my friends. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do. All right. Well, it has been a heck of a stream. Hopefully, the internet has been mostly working this entire time. But if not, we'll have the replays up very soon. We're very glad that you're here and with us. Quick recap if you are just joining us. We had an amazing update out of Arizona. Representative Gillette crushing it, putting together a massive criminal referral packet that is now making its way up to the DOJ and Homeland Security and the rest of them. We listened to about 45 minutes, some of it at 1.5 speed, where he walked us through 10 instances, 10 examples of fraud that they have identified. And it is shocking how bad it is. When we got to the vote, of course, many people who were on one side of the aisle said, I'm not really ready. I don't know if I've heard enough. And so they're waiting to, I guess, get hit in the face with a big stake of fraud or something before they'll actually do something about it. But meanwhile, it is being delivered. We saw the DOJ is responding aggressively in their attempt to dismiss the lawsuit, which is demanding access to the Arizona voter registration database. And things are getting spicy here, and we're happy to have you here as we continue to cover this. Then we turned our attention to Pirro, D.C., Judge Jeb Boasberg, turn that airplane around there, Trump. That judge, again, now interfering and obstructing more criminal investigations into other possible fraudulent actions from Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve. And the week is off to a burner of a start. So, friends, thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being here and supporting our work. And of course, spreading this information around so that people can understand what the heck is going on in our country. But now it's time to hear from you. I think I saw some great donos come in, and we're appreciative of that. Here, let's see what we got over here. And we got some amazing donos in the house. Let's see what we got cooking over here. Who is joining us on the day? Hey, Jigum's here. We got Matt Reese, Voice of the People. Welcome. The Herman Munster Show. Oh, what's up? Oh, yeah, starring Judge Boasberg right here as the Herman Munster. Amazing to see that. Thank you. That looks almost exactly like him. Also looks like Gavin Newsom, too. So what's up, Muffin Rando? Thank you for clipping for us. Relantel says, here's to a safe road trip and to a move. Thank you, Relantel. Thank you for being here for 25 months. Yeah, this week's a little bit squirrely. So we are now officially packed up and out of our place. We've got one final kind of, exit inspection tomorrow. We're heading down to the Valley, and we're officially on the road on Thursday, making our way out to DC. But we'll be back tomorrow and Wednesday. Then we'll be on the road, and we'll hopefully be able to squeeze some streaming in, but it will depend on kind of what kind of time we're making and other things. But we'll be, of course, in contact the entire time and sharing some stuff from the journey across the country. Voice of the People. What's going on? Voice of the People right next door on all of the tubes says Super Mayor Tiffany Henyard is now running as a Republican in Georgia for commissioner. There's no other Republican candidate. Glad you made it safe. Well, we're still here in Prescott. We haven't left yet. So we're still up here. We just kind of changed locations up in Prescott. And then we'll be here tomorrow, and then we'll be down in the Valley on Wednesday, and then we'll be on the road. But Voice, thank you for that. And yeah, so she's running as a Republican. No one's going to challenge her. I'm kind of surprised she's not in jail already. Yeah. And I thought that she was in serious trouble. Wasn't she being prosecuted? Tiffany Henyard, the super mayor. Golly. Thank you, Voice, for that. Matt Reese, what's up, Matt, over on Rumble, says, I bought my house in Mesa from a couple that are deceased. For 4 straight elections, I got mail ballots for both of them. Sent them back each time with a note stating that they're dead. Yeah, and Matt, that's amazing you said that, because I had that similar experience. I bought a house in Scottsdale, and I got the man who died, I got his ballot every election cycle. And if I was a dishonest person, I could have taken it and voted it. But of course, I'm not. But if I was maybe a Democrat fraudster, that would be different. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for watching on Rumble. Shout out to our friends on Rumble. I think we got that all fixed and hopefully streaming beautifully over there. G-Gum, what's up? Hey, just in case I don't catch a live show before you all head out, something special for you and yours on your road trip. That's amazing, G-Gum. Oh my gosh, that looks so good. G-Gum, Gigum, the artist and the meme smith extraordinaire. Oh my gosh, this is so great. Look at the details here. Here we come, Washington, D.C. You want to come take a look at this? Says, that's your boy. That's my beautiful wife, Alexis. And that's our new baby coming very soon. And that's our boy, Axel, right there. And there's the map. Look at that. See your nice, beautiful belly? That's what it looks like. Alexis is here. She just walked in and says, that's amazing. Gigum, thank you for that. We're definitely going to save that one and make sure we have that for the ages as part of our scrapbook and everything else that we're sharing as we cross the country starting on Thursday. Thursday morning, we're hitting the road. So, Gigum, thank you again. Very amazing of you to share that one. Dan says the MDV or DMV, they have hooks into the voter registration system, which can and does change your political party options without you making those selections. It is programmed into the devices and the website. Yeah, and it sounds like that they were actually exploiting that, right? All these third-party providers all exploiting that, tapping in. We had one of the 10 examples where somebody's voter registration was flipped from Republican to Democrat. One of the other people on that board were saying that they've seen it go the opposite way, and both are bad, right? We don't want anybody's voter registration to be flip-flopped either direction because both undermine the integrity of the election. Dan, you're the man. Thanks for the dono. Voice of the People, what's up? Great to see you. About 5 million bad ballots across the country have been found now. Was talking about this on Saturday. We know what happened from Voice of the People. Right next door, Voice of the People at Off Label Podcast, where they dig into a lot of the same stuff that we dig into here. And I'd encourage you to check them out. Voice, hopefully it was a great stream on Saturday. and you got closer to the truth, as is our goal all across the board. Jeanette, what's up? Jeanette Richardson. Thank you, Jeanette. Welcome aboard. Welcome to our newest member. I think we're stick around. So stick around, members, stick around. We didn't do a members only stream this morning because we were out moving this morning, but we'll have an after party. So if you're on YouTube, stick around. If you're on local, stick around. We'll hang out. We'll debrief. We'll take some locals comments and we'll see what is happening over there. Cool Beans. What's up? I remember that guy. Yeah, whatever happened to him? George Garbanzo says, amazing. They will share the list with NGOs, but not with the federal government. What does that tell you? Yeah, certain people get access to certain things when it's useful for them. But if it's the federal government and the actual purpose of their investigation is to root out the fraud, then it's like a 5-alarm fire. I mean, we literally have our attorney general and our secretary of state threatening people with felony prosecution in Arizona for complying with a federal government subpoena. The Senate president of Arizona, our state Senate president, was not anybody who, voluntarily disclosed these things. He got a subpoena, delivered the information over, and they then sent a threatening letter to anybody else. Don't you even think about doing that, or else you're going to go to jail. And they have the power to do it. And of course, we know that they will do it. Tina Peters is sitting in jail for trying to investigate the fraud. And although she's appealing right now, and we're going to keep our eye on that one too. George Garbanzo, thank you for the very nice dono, my man. Thanks for being a member. We appreciate you. Hopefully we see you in a minute in the after party as well. Hey, Real Antel. Good to see you, Rel. Shared. Hey, 10 new membos coming in. All right, so you 2 membos, hang tight. As soon as we're done here, it should auto-magically flip you over to an after party. We'll debrief for a little bit. See what else you guys want to get into. Hey, what's up? Dave Ricard, 2020, welcome. Way too much pressure in the house. We got Joshua Collier. We got Ray Kettle. Tree Love Bird Poo. Nice. Accountant Steve, what's up? Luvart is here. The Slammin' Salmon in the house. Cortez the Conqueror and Doug Forrest. All gifted membos, courtesy of Relantel. And we'll see you here in just a little bit, my friends. Shout out to our amazing membos. We got Off-Label Podcast. What's up? There needs to be a hard check on the black robes. It's supposed to be Congress, but Congress is not doing anything, unfortunately. They're just sitting there like, well, I guess they stole my phone records. I guess there's not much we can do about it. And walking around like Eeyore. So I guess this is shocking. Somebody should do something about this. Yeah, you're the senators, you jerks. It's your constitutional duty. You swore an oath. You are the only people capable of doing this. So do it. Thank you, Off-Label. Hey, Michelle Parsons. What's going on, Michelle? Is Boasberg the same judge in the Flynn case? That's a good question. I'd have to look that one up. From Michelle Parsons. I'm not positive on that. Maybe. I think Flynn was also in D.C., right? So he's in D.C., so it may be. Michelle, thanks for being here for 25 months. Boasberg is definitely the judge who ordered the airplanes around. And then that went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, you can't really order the executive branch to do something because you don't run them. And it was already outside of jurisdictional United States. And so he got slapped back down, but then continued on with the case under a separate provision of the law called contempt. And said, well, the Supreme Court didn't say I can't hold you in contempt for not following my order. So the guy's a mess. Hey, Rick D. Just the News has seen documents and interviewed officials showing that the U.S. knew in 2020 that China had hacked our voter registration databases. I saw a clip on that, Rick D. Shout out. Sent that from an airplane out of the sky. He jumps out of the airplanes, not in. He doesn't hang in the airplanes. He jumps out of them and then submits super chats. Thank you, Rick. So I did see that. John Solomon, I think he said he was going to have a big drop tomorrow. I think tomorrow he said was like day 0 or something like that. So we'll be back tomorrow. We're going to do an early stream tomorrow morning. So schedule is going to be a little bit wonky because we have some stuff we got to close out at our other rental this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon. So we'll be in the morning and we'll see what the day has for us. Rick, we might be jumping into that. I think I saw John Solomon with a clip saying that they were going to actually release info tomorrow, which should be pretty amazing. Rick D, another one, says, they have no problem providing driver's licenses info to the NCIC for police in other states to verify that they are valid. Yeah, like a NICS check. So when you're checking somebody to see if they have any, wants or warrants, any outstanding felonies or something, pull someone over, put it in the system, validate this person. Oh, you got a warrant out in Mississippi for 3 felony murders. Okay. Then they can lock you back down on that. So yeah, they share it all the time across states, outside of agencies for various purposes. But the one thing you can't share it for is if you're being investigated for fraud. Then it's like, that's way too much. It's egregious. No way. Privacy rights. So Rick, thank you for that. Renee Sargent, what's going on? Yeah, I did see this one. The Supreme Court, I think, is going to hear the case on the Haitian. Is it the Haitians? Yeah, 350,000 Haitians. So I think Trump just got blocked. There's so many of them going on. I have to look them up. But the Haitians and the Nicaraguans and all of the various countries, the Venezuelans and the Ecuadorians, and the list goes on and on because we're invaded by the whole planet. But the Supreme Court, says Renee, has announced they'll be stepping in and hearing the case after activist judges barred the Trump administration from ending TPS status for over 350,000 Haitians. I think we covered one of the filings from the DOJ up to the Supreme Court. That was last week, right? I think we covered the petition and we were asking whether they were going to accept it. Sounds like they have. That is great news. Great news. So thank you for that, Renee Sargent. Rick D. Yeah, I saw this news. Rick D. sharing a post from President Trump. Susie Wiles, unfortunately, has breast cancer, and breast cancer sucks. My mama is a breast cancer survivor. We've gone through that a lot in our family and her sisters and aunts. So prayers up for Susie Wiles. We hope that she can beat that immediately and quickly. And prayers up for all of our cancer survivors or anybody who's been impacted by it. Cancer sucks, unequivocally. Rick D., thanks for that. Prayers up for Susie Wiles. Dan, what's up? Your engagement with the voter registration system does notify the political parties of the event. DMV, MVD causes it all. Yeah, and it sounds like they're actually in violation of federal law, in Arizona law, in some of these instances where they're automatically registering people. So there's a lot more to be revealed on this, and we're looking forward to full accountability in Arizona because we saw what we lived through it. We lived through Kerry Lake. We lived through 2020, and the list goes on. And it's not just them, right? It's also senators and House representatives like Abe Amadei, Attorney General. And once they are able to ensconce themselves in these positions, like once Katie Hobbs rigs an election, makes herself governor, then we get AG Mays, we get Secretary of State Fontes, then they create and backfill the system, right? They put walls up around the system to perpetuate the frauds and to perpetuate the cycle. And one example is threatening prosecution for any other person who discloses information pursuant to a valid subpoena. So you got to get into the position of power. It's like, capture the flag or something. You make yourself, you rise to the top of the hill and you just put the walls up so nobody else can get up there. And then they are in power forever, just like in California. Hey, this old guy, thank you for this. Hey, Rob, safe travels for you. Adventures in moving always bring surprises. I pray yours are all good ones. But me too. Boasberg, so far it's been, a lot of work, like a lot more work. You start opening up cabinets and stuff like, oh my gosh, there's more. But we are through, I think, the major hurdle of the move. And now it's just kind of some minor travel around to wrap up some things. And then we're on our way out. And we should be there Sunday. All things going according to plan should be out there Sunday. This old guy, thank you. And we can't wait to share, more of DC and the activities out there with everybody here. This old guy, thank you for your love. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the nice dono. Judge Boasberg is a disgrace. And just had to add to that one. Thank you for that. Hey, Nathan Lopez in the house. Good to see you, senor. That is, of course, Papa de Alexis. That is our father-in-law. Shout out Nathan Lopez in the house for the big super chat. Nathan's been up here helping us a ton. And we've got amazing parents. My parents came up, Nathan came over, and we had some amazing help running around, getting all the things and picking up tape this morning and boxes of tape. It's like amazing. Sir, thank you for your help. Nathan Lopez in the house. Great to have you. Lady Ice, and thank you for the big dono. And I don't know if we're seeing him later. Maybe. All right. So we might see you later, but if not, we'll see you tomorrow. Hey, Lady Ice, what's up? Judge Emmett Sullivan had Flynn case happy and safe travels. What's up, Lady Ice? Judge Emmett Sullivan. Oh, got it. Emmett Sullivan. Thank you for that, Lady Ice. And rub some dirt on it. I remember moves and the discoveries while clearing out the cabinets and closets. What discoveries did you make in the back of the hobby closet? Rub some dirt on it. Good luck with your off-label use of your Tesla for extra suburban travels. Prayers up for your move. It should be pretty good. Yeah, we mapped the whole thing out. There's all these travel apps now that, of course, plan your move and tell you where to stop and how to stop and what the travels look like. Rub some dirt on it. Thank you for that. We didn't find anything too interesting, I don't think. Most of that has been offloaded in all the weird hobbies, but we'll pick up some new ones once we're out in DC, and I'm sure it's just going to be another extravaganza. Rub some dirt on it, aka Whirlpool Galaxy. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the dono, and we appreciate all of that. Friends, it's been a beautiful stream. Thank you so much for sending those in and for your support on the show and for liking the video and subscribing and all the things. We'll have an after party with some of our Membo friends if you care to join us. We got some comments over on X. Let's see what we've got. We've got Forgot My Name, sharing what's going on over in Virginia. Thank you for that, Forgot My Name. We got Ben Unn, says, Judge Boasberg has to go. The nickname Bobo has a storied history, as Bobo was the name of a famous gorilla at the Seattle Zoo who reigned over his enclosure. Wow. That sounds like an interesting story there, Ben Un. Lots of bananas. Amazing. So amazing story about a monkey, famous gorilla in Seattle named Bobo. And of course, we had Neuro D, who shares our Watchers link. And we appreciate that, Neuro D. We're over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And if you want to come join us for our members only after party, we'll be hanging and heading there right now. We can't wait to do that. Once again, Nathan, thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here. And thank you for the nice dono. Didn't have to do that, but you're a generous man. But all right, so friends, we'll pause here. Before we close it out, want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Big shout outs to John McGarvey in the house, Muffin Rando. We've got Donut Mind Me helping out. Thank you, gentlemen. We also have, of course, K Bean and Carrie B in the mornings. We got Neuro D, Janik, and Dog Digger modding the fort down for us on the Rumbles. We got Jigam Geegum. Thank you, Jigam, for the very amazing graphic and illustration. You're awesome and you're very talented. Grateful for you. Jigam Geegum, Elliot, Docmaster, and Just Rhonda, the purveyor of fine emojis in the chat. Friends, it's been a beautiful stream. We'll pause here for the evening. Tomorrow morning, I think we'll come live early so that we can close things out up here and then head back down to Phoenix. So probably about 12 Eastern time, 9 Arizona. We'll stream for a little bit, hopefully cover some of the Supreme Court stuff. We'll cover some of the China hacking, which I think is going to be a bombshell because we saw that they got picked up at Customs and Borders with like 10,000 fake IDs in hand. And we'll have a great stream tomorrow morning. So hopefully you can come join us if we don't see you in the members only after party, which is where we're going right now. We'll take some locals comments, debrief, see what else you have to say about the show and what else you're monitoring out there. And then, of course, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll get into it again. But that is where we'll leave it on the night. I hope that you have a beautiful rest. You sleep very well. And then you return back here tomorrow to get into it again. Because in order to do that appropriately, we are going to need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. My friends, members, stick around. We'll have an after party. Otherwise, my friends, sleep very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chatting line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers, truth on our side. Watching the watchers, we won't be denied. Watching the watchers, eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. a friend who